The entire government in Sri Lanka is controlled by one family, the Rajapaksas. The president is Rajapaksa Gotabaya, the prime minister is his older brother Mahinda. The finance minister is the third brother, Basil Rahana. And the eldest of the Rajapaksa siblings is Chamal, who is the country's home minister. The list does not even end here. There is Namal Rajapaksha, who is the Minister of Youth and Sports, and he happens to be the Prime Minister's son. Then there is Yoshitha Rajapaksha, who is the Prime Minister's Chief of Staff. Yashindra Rajapaksha, Sri Lanka's Minister for Agriculture, the list goes on. The latter, the Director of Sri Lankan Airlines. There's a point to be said here. All in all, the Rajapaksha family holds 9 ministerial berths. This includes 7 cabinet posts in the Sri Lankan government. Currently, they control 75% of Sri Lanka's budget. The same Sri Lanka where there are no exam papers. The country has literally run out of paper. Streets are going dark, people are queuing up for fuel, and power cuts have become more normal than they ever before. This is the family that is responsible for Sri Lanka's doom. To understand their role, let's take you years back. The year was 2007. Mahinda Rajapaksha was Sri Lanka's president, and he took a major policy decision. Colombo began borrowing money. Government bonds were sold in capital markets. 15 years later, that borrowing hasn't stopped today. These loans account for 38% of Sri Lanka's debt. The loans from China made the situation far worse. Mahinda Rajapaksha was Sri Lanka's president from 2005 to 2015. And during this period, China was involved in 70% of all new infrastructure projects in Sri Lanka. It gave at least $14 billion from 2005 to 2015. According to some estimates, Sri Lanka owes China more than $10 billion. A large chunk of these loans was taken by the government. What added to this crisis, however, was their ill-timed policies. In 2019, President Gotabaya Rajapaksa cut taxes. Sri Lanka's value-added tax was slashed by almost half. The government also began printing more money. Both of these policies backfired. While the pandemic has further battered the economy, many believe it was the policies that plunged Sri Lanka into its biggest economic crisis. For more insights into this story, we are now being joined by Shanakiyan Rasamanickam, live from Sri Lanka's Batticaloa. He happens to be a member of the Sri Lankan Parliament. Sir, thank you so much for joining us on WION World is One.
Hi Priyanka, good evening to you.
My first question to you, I want to first start by asking you about the situation on ground in Sri Lanka as of now. We've heard of massive protests, hundreds taking to the streets in what has been described as a night of violence. What can you tell us about this? As we understand, the Sri Lankan president blames an extremist group for the same.
In fact, this has been the same rhetoric that the government has relied on. Extremism, terrorism, religion, hatred, these sort of rhetorics have been used to coming to power and to stay in power in the past. But I feel it's so disheartening and it's heartbreaking to see the scenes in Sri Lanka where thousands of people, irrespective of race, language, religion, are on the streets protesting, demanding for the most basic commodities. So we predicted that this situation would occur maybe a year and a half ago when the Sri Lankan government refused to restructure its debt and kept on using our foreign reserves to meet repayments for loans. We warned the government that this situation would happen, and last night's scenes turned violent and turned ugly. But however, we warned the government that people are going to resort to these sort of methods when their voices aren't heard, because people have been on the streets since the government came into power for various reasons. It could be for Muslims on the streets demanding that their last rites be allowed, where the Muslims were cremated, therefore bodies were forcibly cremated during the COVID pandemic. So from there onwards, for economic crisis, for salary increases, and now for power, fuel, I mean, people are paying for it. So even when people pay for it, if they're not able to access it, naturally people are going to get upset. So we warned that the government, that the people would turn against the government in such a manner, and that the government should be ready to take appropriate action. But however, it has fallen on deaf ears, and now we see the results. And I don't think that there was any extremist group behind this. And I think the President's media office had issued a statement saying extremist group, and then cabinet ministers later then clarified saying that that is not what they meant. But however, the interesting part was that these people were going to be charged. Almost 45 people who were part of the protest last night were arrested and were going to be charged using the Prevention of Terrorism Act law, which is a draconian law that we have been asking to repeal. And later on, when the Human Rights Commission and the other independent organizations exerted pressure on the police and the government, they had agreed to, or it just reported that they were going to...
I'd just like to interject at this point. I'd like to focus more on the economic crisis as well. You've spoken about the hardships that the people of Sri Lanka are facing. We also have been reporting on the same. Unending queues for ration. Fuel is getting more expensive than ever. There are massive power cuts that have become the new normal. Sri Lanka is inevitably experiencing its worst economic crisis since independence. What led to this?
Precisely.
And does the government have a plan in place to counter the same?
Well, precisely. I mean, this is all due to the economic crisis that we are facing, these civil protests and all that. Because today we had, in fact, in my district, we had a power cut which was 13 hours. So, every hour that is where there is no power, our productivity falls down so much so that we are going further into debt. And with the fuel, not just the fuel prices, even at higher prices, there is no fuel. There has been a ship waiting at the Colombo harbour for almost 7 days now with diesel, and the government of Sri Lanka didn't have enough money to pay to clear it. So that is the situation in the country right now. And going forward, what is the government's plan is anybody's guess. If we don't go to the IMF and if we don't restructure our debt, and also, however, the political party that I represent is the Tamil National Alliance. We have proposed that the government resolves the national ethnic question that has been unresolved as a way of coming out of this economic crisis, because the Tamil Sri Lankan diaspora the economy of the Tamil Sri Lankan diaspora is much larger than Sri Lanka's entire debt. So if we come up with some solution where Sri Lankans who are chased out of this country with a civil war, if we come up with a way where they can reinvest in Sri Lanka, that might be another way where we can bring some foreign currency into the country. But we are yet to see what the government is going to do.
Absolutely. Thank you so much for all those insights into what's actually happening on ground in Sri Lanka. Thank you so much for speaking to us on WION World is One.
Thank you, Priyanka. Thank you, and appreciate the fact that you're reporting on matters in Sri Lanka. That we are thankful for that. Thank you.
WION World is One is now available in your country. Download the app now and get all the news updates on the move.